maybe people don't know this. As you lose this estrogen receptor alpha activation, you're losing a whole bunch of activities that are protected.
So if you have a head of broccoli, start chewing it, the glucoraphanin, the precursor molecules in there, you break the cell wall through this chewing, and it releases an enzyme that converts that glucoraphanin into sulforaphane. You swallow it, you get the benefit.
You are tuned into the Dr. Tina Show with Dr. Tina Moore. For more, visit drtyna.com. David and John, thank you so much for coming on the Dr. Tina Show today. I'm really excited to have you here today. We're going to tell a cool story that I think my listeners need to hear about sulforaphane. And I found your product along the way. And we are going to just jump in. And everybody listening, just hang in there. We're going to bring this all together. So will you guys introduce yourselves and let the audience know a bit about you?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having us. I'm David Roberts. I'm one of the founders of Mora Labs, and I have a background in public health and biomedical engineering.
Yeah, John Gilday, also scientific officer for our labs. And my background, I did research for 25 years and have been in the lab for even before that, but very interested in general health and metabolic signaling and all those good things.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to have you guys on for a very specific reason I'm going to share with my audience. I know that right now, estrogen's all the rage and everybody's getting very excited that they took the black box warning off of estrogen. And I've been prescribing estrogen replacement therapy and hormone replacement therapy for decades. I never got scared off by the Women's Health Initiative. I also am very careful about when and where I apply estrogen because I know it can go down unfavorable pathways. And that's something that is not being talked about very often. And so I personally just got my Dutch test back. And it's actually interesting because the last 5 Dutch tests I ran all say the same thing, which is I am going down a pathway that I don't really want to be going down on the tail end. So we take our estrogen and then it decides how it's going to behave in the body based on myriad of things, including our lifestyle and behaviors. And then boom, it goes down the pathway. And so in my search for answers, I was revisiting sulforaphane, which is a molecule made from broccoli. I'll have you guys explain it in a minute. I just want to kind of preface this story. And my dear friend, Dr. Carrie Jones, she's one of my besties. Every single time I would message her over the last, 7 years complaining about hormonal symptoms, she'd just send me back like a little wine emoji. It's the wine, Tina. It's the wine. And she's who turned me on to sulforaphane because everybody talks about DIM, and she's adamant that DIM can inhibit your estrogen. And this is not what we're going for necessarily when a woman's perimenopausal or menopausal and estrogen's leaving the building and then she's taking DIM, which might be driving it down lower. She's just absolutely in love with sulforaphane. So I found you guys, and I know that you have a really shelf-stable form, which I know is hard to come by. And so I wanted to have you on so we could have this discussion. So people understand, women in particular, that your estrogen is going down different pathways, and we can help mitigate that to some degree with some of the awesome supplements you guys produce.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay. So, let's talk about that. Will you give us, Dr. John, will you give us kind of some of the nerdy background on how estrogen is metabolized and why and where sulforaphane fits in there?
Yeah, so probably the way to start thinking about it is that estrogen is metabolized like a lot of xenobiotics. It gets conjugated and changed and hydroxylated and push down all these different pathways. And probably a good way to think about it is that one of those pathways for hydroxy estrogen can be a DNA adduct. So it's genotoxic. And so there's lots of different ways that estrogen can be metabolized, quinolated. And so the bare estrogen that normally hits estrogen receptor alpha and estrogen receptor beta are pushing on pathways that are obviously preparing a woman for being able to carry a baby, which is an optimal metabolic state. So it's a good way to start off the conversation is that estrogen receptor alpha induction, even though it's vilified, actually is a very beneficial compound, even when it's going down that pathway. And as you lose this estrogen receptor alpha activation, you're losing a whole bunch of activities that are protective. Maybe people don't know this, but as up to menopause, a woman is protected against all kinds of disease states, including all cardiometabolic states, fatty liver, just the list goes on and on. And then as you go through menopause, a woman actually catches back up to a man. And so the rate actually accelerates faster than a man as you lose estrogen and catches back up, close to around 60. And so that's a good framing to start with, is that estrogen is very protective, mitochondria, metabolism, bone density, in a million different ways. So that's how I generally think about it. And then as you lose this protective function, some of these other pathways that come into play are really important, like NRF2. You lose NRF2 induction, you lose SIRT1 activation, AMP kinase as well, and so lose the ability to activate AMP kinase as well. So all of these pathways that are general longevity anchors are being lost when you lose estrogen, and so that's probably just a generalized way of thinking about estrogen in relation to those three big hubs. I would say NRF2, NF-kappa B, AMP kinase, SIRT1.
Can you give the audience an understanding and make it more of like 12th grade level of the AMPK SIRT1 and why that's so critical?
Yeah, so SIRT1, I'll start off a little bit more complicated and then get more general. So SIRT1 is a genome gatekeeper, and so if you get double-stranded breaks in your DNA, SIRT1 is part of the complex that goes and repairs that DNA. So you don't want it distracted. You want it functioning normally, and so starting from an epigenome state, you don't want it distracted. You want SIRT to be able to do this. It's a histone deacetylase, and so that's a good place to start. And then AMP kinase is a metabolic sensor, so it measures the amount of AMP to ATP. So when you're running out of energy, it turns on a bunch of pathways to clean up shop, to start reusing some of the broken parts around your garage and start making a good car again. So that's this mitophagy, autophagy, and so most people can understand AMP kinase as the fasting mimic hub. AMP kinase is activated there, and then NRF2 is a response to toxic overload to turn on detoxification and block advanced
Glycation.
yeah, both AMP kinase does that, but NRF2 is in the pathway of advanced not AGEs, reactive oxygen species.
Yeah.
So it's a way to mop up those things. So that's a general idea. So I'm not really good at the fifth grade part.
Well, and I think just to take a bird's eye view, a lot of the things John just talked about, histone deacetylases, mitophagy, which is taking old mitochondria, showing them the door to create new mitochondria, autophagy, the same with cells. All of those are anti-aging, right?
Yes.
And so they're potently anti-aging. Fasting mimicking is potently anti-aging, and so the detox pathway. So sulforaphane is the best natural molecule at turning on the NRF2 pathway, and that's important because that's responsible for phase 2 detoxification. It's the best natural molecule at that. and for turning on the antioxidant response system, which John was alluding to, 200 different genes. So it's not it itself is not an antioxidant. It's sort of a master antioxidant that goes into the nucleus, turns on 200 different genes that express and promote 200 different antioxidants, and it stays on for 72 hours. So it does a lot. It's actually it does so much that I don't like talking about everything it does because it sounds like snake oil.
Well, when I first heard about it from Dr. Carrie Jones years ago, she was trying to get me to grow broccoli sprouts, like I said, and I tried it, and I was like, "This is a mess. I'm not good at keeping plants alive." And I know you guys actually sell broccoli sprouts, which is very cool. I'm gonna consider it again. But
We sell the seeds.
Oh, the seeds. Okay. She was telling me, I think it was like 2018. I mean, she had me all over.
Oh, wow.
She was super excited about this. And she used to teach for Dutch. She still does, but she has a wonderful way of explaining the estrogen pathways and phase 1 and phase 2 and different ways of explaining to folks how it works. And she has a bathtub analogy of, how the bathtub gets backed up, et cetera. And I remember coming to her and I was going to throw some dim at it. And she was like, yeah, no, that's not a great idea. Try the sulforaphane. And there wasn't a lot out there on it. And it wasn't honestly until I started researching for this podcast that I realized what an immense impact it has, which is interesting because I belong to a longevity mastermind and I am in the longevity space quite a bit. And right now everybody's just going on and on about peptides and on about getting, HRT, which I was talking about that a long time ago. The problem is if you don't know what pathway it's going down, and if you put these substances into a toxic body with a high toxic burden, with their own, all of these detox pathways you just described and longevity pathways, if those are not working and revved, then things get glommed up and people bonk. They kind of hit the wall, if you will. And I've seen this clinically time and time again. And so I always say that peptides and hormones are reserved for those who are already metabolically optimized and taking good care of themselves. Or at the very least, you have to be considerate of making sure that these pathways are going in the right direction, right? Bad things happen when you put estrogen into a metabolically compromised, inflamed body. And same with testosterone. And so once I started researching for this episode, I was like, holy smokes, I had no idea there's in the notes that you guys sent over even, there's nothing even there. We hadn't even gotten to menopause and perimenopause. So there's like 7 pages of really interesting information that I just was chewing on. So let's talk about some of that because I think that people don't understand their toxic burden. I used to test everybody for everything. I'm not so concerned about testing people now for toxic burden. I just assume your toxic bucket is your toxic bucket, mine is mine, and how much mine can handle versus how much yours can handle depend on a lot of variables. But I think that having tools in the toolbox to help this along and help make sure that the hormones and peptides we are using are doing their thing correctly. And sulforaphane is looking like just a knock it out of the park molecule for this. So let's tell me some of that. I know you guys, we got into it a little bit, but
I just want to say, I think the most important thing to take from this podcast is that so sulforaphane is infamously unstable. And so we have the only naturally stabilized form of it that's in a capsule that you can take. It's 5 milligrams per capsule, which is roughly equivalent of 2.5 pounds of mature broccoli. And so we go to conferences, we have doctors come up to us every conference. Well, what about this brand? It says on the back sulforaphane glucosinolate, which means sulforaphane precursor. And so I'm like, I'm sorry, it doesn't have sulforaphane in it. It has the molecule that comes before sulforaphane, which is stable. So if you have a head of broccoli, start chewing it, the glucoraphanin, the precursor molecules in there, you break the cell wall through this chewing, and it releases an enzyme that converts that glucoraphanin into sulforaphane. You swallow it, you get the benefit. But if you try to harness it, it degrades. And so basically the reason, the other all of the other broccoli supplements don't have stabilized sulforaphane and have glucoraphanin is because that glucoraphanin is stable. And so some of them say they have myrosinase in it. There are a lot of marketing tricks, but the bottom line is if you take a glucoraphanin supplement or you take our supplement, you can notice a big difference because the sulforaphane is already converted, and you swallow our supplement, and it turns on the NRF2 pathway. So it's broccoli plus because it has it has sulforaphane, but it has 7 other cousin molecules. They're called isothiocyanates, and then we add one from watercress. It's called PEITC, phenylethyl isothiocyanate. Name's not important. What is important is that, and this is in the literature, and we've shown it in our own tests. It stimulates NRF2. It's synergistically with sulforaphane. So 1 + 1 = 5. So it turns on NRF2 5 times more than sulforaphane alone. And
Oh,
so
wow.
it's a huge benefit. And so again, not all supplements are created equal, and even now there are, I think, 5 supplements on Amazon that on the back, if you turn it over on the back in the ingredient section, it says sulforaphane, and you ask them for their certificate of authentication, the COA, and it says glucoraphanin, and so they're getting that bold and trying to trick consumers.
Wow. And if people ask, why can't I just eat broccoli?
Yeah, I mean, again, to get the same, there are two answers. You'd have to eat a lot of broccoli, so 5 pounds of mature broccoli to get 2 capsules, which is what the amount we recommend. 1 capsule will turn on NRF2, though. And then also, if you're growing sprouts, we back, this was, I think, 4 years, maybe 6 years ago now, we were looking for organic seeds and so we bought 6 different brands, and none of them had the ability to produce sulforaphane.
Wow.
Organic broccoli seeds, and we're like, what the heck? So we waited 6 months. We did it again. I think we bought 9 different brands, and the same 6, but then again added 3 more, and 7 of the 9 could produce sulforaphane. So at that point, we're like, this is crazy. So we're not a seed company, but that's why we offer seeds, is because we know that you get 400 milligrams in a half a pound, 400 milligrams of once you convert it, once you chew it, or you get 400 milligrams from our seed. And so you don't. It takes the guesswork out if you want to go that direction in growing the sprouts.
And if I'm correct, cooking the broccoli can actually inhibit things, right? So but I don't love giving patients raw broccoli because it's a goitrogen. So can you talk about that a little bit?
And so the mature broccoli is a goitrogen. The seeds and the sprouts are not. And so we derive our supplement from the seeds and the sprouts. And so and if you've ever had, we've talked about this before. I used to grow, before we had the supplement, grow enough broccoli sprouts for 10 families. My wife had breast cancer. That's how we came about stabilizing it, and that's how John was basically, he taught me everything I know about cancer. And so we were growing all these broccoli sprouts, but I had 1 and 3-year-old boys. It's taking care of her, and it just wasn't enough time in the day to grow that much. And then if you try to travel, they don't really travel well. And then in the summer you get mold issues. And so I think we were at lunch. I was like, it'd be really nice if there was a stable form of this out there. And so a couple years later, John's like, I stabilized it.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, because growing broccoli sprouts is a whole ordeal. And it's to hear that some of these seeds don't even produce what we're looking for is... Talk to me about the chewing part with the broccoli too, because I always thought that was really interesting. The actual chewing is what releases what we need, correct?
The cell wall has the enzyme called myrosinase.
Yep.
And the myrosinase is the enzyme that converts the precursor molecule glucoraphanin into sulforaphane. And so you have to kind of release that from the cell wall in order to convert it. So yeah, you have to chew it. So if you're not chewing it, you're not you're not converting.
So there's just a lot. My point is there's just a lot that has to go on because I hear people all the time, well, why don't I just eat broccoli? And I'm like, yeah, that's not that's not the easiest route there. So I that's awesome that you guys have a stabilized form, because that's no joke. And to hear that other companies are basically being somewhat deceptive.
It's the wild. I mean, I call it the Wild West. It's just like anything goes, and and so yeah. I mean, there was did you watch the Olympics? There was this Swedish brand, Nomi, that got some actually network attention because all these athletes were drinking it. It was a broccoli sprout beverage.
Okay.
And they didn't say how much sulforaphane they had. And they said they did say it has isothiocyanates, but which is what sulforaphane is. And John and I were like, how the heck do they have a stable liquid form of it? And so they're breaking into the U.S. market. So I just bought some and tested it in our lab, because we test every batch, and internally we test every batch externally, and it had nothing. It's just had nothing.
Wow.
But they don't label that they have sulforaphane. It says broccoli sprout extract, lemon, and a little sugar. And I'm like, well, that's what it is, But it does kind of on the front label it says ITC, which stands for isothiocyanates. So I don't know.
That's really deceptive and all too common. Well,
Yeah.
and people think broccoli sprout extract. I've taken all kinds of broccoli sprout supplements and didn't ever really think anything of it over the years until I actually started getting into this, because I was, like I said, I got those Dutch tests back and I'm like, I got to get this pathway to chill out, because it's no good. It's not going to lead me to the best places. And so I realize that a lot of it comes down to lifestyle, the way that our hormones are going to be handled. But I think a lot of it comes down to genetics too. And so to have a tool, I just think that all women taking estrogen replacement therapy, it's handed out. I'm very excited that doctors are feeling more comfortable about prescribing it. I'm very excited that some of the stigma has been removed. I'm really concerned that a lot of these doctors are literally brand new to this and don't have any idea. I mean, I just don't think you can do hormone replacement therapy without an integrative approach. You can't. There's not safe, in my opinion. You have to be addressing lifestyle. You have to be considering some supplementation like this to be helpful to pathways. And it's just the way it is. But they don't want to talk about that.
And John, correct me if I'm wrong, but so sulforaphane does work in all three phases of detox. And so you get the detox flu from detox programs because it speeds up phase one, which is sometimes makes the toxin even more toxic to prepare it for phase two. Phase two is making it water soluble so it can get into the serum. Phase three, binding, excreting. And so sulforaphane slows down phase one and then speeds up phase two. So you don't get that detox flu, but right, you can actually, it does detox some of those bad estrogen derivatives, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, it's from just that standpoint, if the estrogen, that people are taking goes down the wrong, it becomes toxic, the sulforaphane can detox.
Yes. And that is why I really do. I think every woman taking estrogen replacement therapy should be considering sulforaphane, period. Like I'm not trying to sell anything. Like Carrie Jones was so adamant about this. She's like, here's your estrogen, here's your sulforaphane. And I think that now that I'm understanding it better, it makes perfect sense. Let me back up and explain the phase one, phase two to people, because you brushed over that, and people need to understand phase one, everything gets glommed up in most people because most people have really crummy phase two going, at least what I've seen clinically. Yeah. And they end up with all these intermediates, which, like you said, are often more toxic sometimes than the original substance. And so now they've got these intermediates. A lot of women on estrogen are not having their thyroids addressed. They're not having their gut health addressed. And now they're not pooping. So I will not give estrogen replacement to somebody who's not pooping at least once a day, because it backs up and it reabsorbs, and it's just a whole hot mess. And so, like you said, when people detox, they feel terrible because phase two is just like, meh. It's not going. Phase one starts cranking, and now they're in this sort of toxic soup and they feel awful. And so that's really cool that so you're saying that it kind of, it upregulates phase 2 and slows down phase 1 so that it's
It
a
does.
more comfortable experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does it help with the pooping part? Does it help get in any capacity, like microbiome wise or bowels?
Yeah, it does with my dad. He swears by it. Yeah, I mean, John, what do you?
Yeah, we know that if you study tight junctions at all,
Yeah.
a central feature of that, and you can read it in any review, is that NRF2 induction causes tight junctions to seal. And so as soon as you get the tight junctions in your enterocytes sealed, you've just established the stage 1 of lowering inflammation. So you don't have endotoxins leaving your feces, and then you decrease inflammation because of that. That's that TLR4 pathway, endotoxin TLR4. You get the macrophage histamine angle from that same thing. So we always say that if you're chronically ill, the first place you should start is the enterocytes of your colon. You have to get your microbiome established, and once that happens, then you have a mucus layer that is protective, and then you get pretty quickly your microbiome changing, your FTB ratio changing very, very quickly. And so NRF2 is a central feature in that for sure.
One of my favorite studies, it's a mice study where they had young mice and old mice, and they measured the microbiome of each, and then they gave the old mice sulforaphane, and then measured their microbiome again, and it was the same as the young mice. So basically, their microbiome age decreased so that they had the microbiome of young mice. So it's like, wow.
That's huge.
Yeah.
I am a naturopathic physician, and it is treat the gut first, 100%. Like treat the gut first. Everybody gets their gut tested and treated, and that's just, I mean, treating the gut and getting people's leaky gut handled to some degree is easier said than done. But what a wonderful tool to have that on board too, because that's huge for people listening. This is my big issue with GLP-1s, peptides, again, and hormones, is people's gut health is atrocious. They're like swimming in lipopolysaccharides. They've got tons of inflammation from it. It's so ironic. So the microdosing GLP-1, that was me. I'm the person who started that whole thing. And my strategy with that was not as a vanity weight loss tool. It was not taking a lower version, like many are calling a standard starting dose of GLP-1s a microdose. And that is not at all what I was hypothesizing. I was thinking of it more like a LDN, where if we gave a microdose, like a true microdose, I'm talking a fifth to a 10th to a 50th of the standard starting dose, if cellularly the receptors wouldn't upregulate and our own endogenous GLP-1 wouldn't work better, because people's L cells are trashed. And so their GLP-1 production endogenously is trashed as well. And I was getting really good results with patients, and I was having my friends who were clinicians try it, and they were having great success with MCAS patients and SIRS patients and patients that were just very sensitive, that really couldn't handle anything. They couldn't handle any treatment because their immune systems were so fired up. And so that was the original GLP-1 microdosing strategy. It somehow has gotten twisted into some marketing nonsense of like vanity weight loss. But the problem with GLP-1s that people don't realize, and I've said this on the podcast before, is that in taking such high doses that you stall out the gut, you literally are there's like a 45 to 50% increase in SIBO in patients who are taking standard doses. And so the SIBO is just upregulating the lipopolysaccharides, which is actually driving the diabetes downstream. It's insane. They're literally giving them something to treat. Anyway, that again, I really don't like regular high doses at all. I realize some people need to take them and there's no shame, but there are so many things that can go wrong. And so having something that can seal up the tight junctions and not have all the leaky gut happening is kind of a big deal.
And one area that John did some research on in our lab was looking at glyphosate. So glyphosate's known to cause leaky gut, opening in the tight junctions. And so he did this cell culture study opening tight junctions with glyphosate, but then giving broccoli, sulforaphane, and showing that it's protective against that.
Wow.
And so basically, the once they were open, correct, that they can close them. Is that right?
It's slower to close them for sure.
Yeah.
In that study, we did the gap junction too, and so a lot of people don't think about the fact that it's a tissue. As soon as you break those tight junctions, the cells start acting like individuals. Epithelial mesenchymal transition, and so when you tighten tight junctions, gap junctions don't always go along with that. But when you get gap junctions, the whole tissue starts acting like an intact tissue. And so you can get all kinds of improvements from your whole intestine rhythmically contracting. Those are things that happen in the smooth muscle cells, but in the enterocytes, those cells communicating also is really important. And you were talking about L cells. That you could do a whole podcast on L cells, and if you want to predict the future, the next thing is going to be GLP-2.
Yes, I've been reading about GLP-2 a little bit.
I think they're on GLP-3s now, aren't they?
No, it's wild. It's so interesting because I can't tell you how many conferences I spoke at over the past decade, medical conferences where I was like the token naturopathic doctor going up there. I was big in the regenerative medicine space. That was what I did predominantly in clinic when I had my big clinic. And I would go up there and give these lectures to MDs about leaky gut and gut health and how you can't fix pain if somebody's spilling if the leaky gut's happening and it's driving inflammation, it's driving autoimmune, it's driving pain, the TLR4, like all of that. And they would just sit there and sometimes heckle me. There was always a couple MDs in the back that would heckle me. And I was like, okay, guys, whatever. The gut's the future. That's everything. And then the microbiome science started coming out and that got, a little bit of traction. And now here we are with, I think GLP-1s are remarkable when used appropriately, but oh my gosh, like it all comes back down to the gut at the end of the day. So
Absolutely.
That's it. The other thing I thought was really cool about sulforaphane, speaking of things I love, was I love sauna because I love heat shock proteins. And I have just beat the drum to death that if you are, and for those listening, check with your doctor, of course, this is not medical advice, but if you don't know what to do and you're not feeling well, my best advice for people is to go get hot. Like just go get hot. Just go heat yourself up, whether it's through a walk or a hot bath or a sauna or whatever kind of exercise someone can handle. Getting hot seems to clear the cobwebs up. And I firmly believe that's due to heat shock proteins. And then I was reading that sulforaphane induces heat shock proteins. Do I have that right?
Yep, it does.
That's crazy. Tell me more about that.
I just know it as sort of a fact is that whatever turns on the heat shock proteins, that stress, sulforaphane acts as a mild hormetic stress. And so there is a little bit of ROS generated at first when you take sulforaphane, but it's a mild and would be similar to exercise. And so it'd be similar to exercise, like when a young person exercises versus when I exercise. Those are two different things. Young people, you exercise, your NRF2 goes up like crazy. Past 60 or so, NRF2 goes down if you over-exercise. So, it's a good analogy is when you're young, one thing might be awesome. When you're over 60, you have to be more careful about how you're doing your exercise. And we're doing a collaboration with some people that are testing whether if you take sulforaphane and then do vigorous exercise, is it better in elderly? So we think probably is protective of that exact thing, or of over-exercising. Where is that point where you over-exercise?
They don't want to think that they're over-exercising often. I had many a patient in their 60s and plus who were hardcore cyclists, hardcore runners, wouldn't let it go, and they would just run themselves right into diabetes. I would tell them to slow their roll, that their oxidative stress was high, and next thing you know, they're diabetic. And I'm like, okay. They all seem to like to drink too, though. I'll add that in there: the drinking and then the high oxidative exercise. But why? How does that happen? Well, maybe you could tell the audience what's the problem with that?
With drinking?
No, just that. Well, does sulforaphane help with that?
Yeah,
Does.
we don't lead with this, but basically, so the in the liver, the alcohol gets turned into an aldehyde. That aldehyde is super toxic, and it can lead to the hangover. And so sulforaphane bypasses that aldehyde creation. So that's step one. And then because what we just talked about with toxins and it working in all three phases of detox, it's you have to be very vigorous in your alcohol consumption to be able to be sick the next morning. Typically, most people, I always bring it to a holiday party for that reason. So because people in my town know about it and kind of like, okay. But I mean, going back to exercise though, like, I mean, I give it to my kids. We're all swimmers, and it's super good for performance. That's not all I'll give them ubiquinol and PQQ, but like the sulforaphane is huge for performance. But it's also, and we have 40, 50 somethings, 60 somethings in our hometown that are religiously take. It's kind of this subset of our customers that use it for recovery. It's so good for recovery, and so I mean, I guess that's what these guys these people we're partnering with in the research are looking at. But from an anecdotal standpoint, it seems like the sulforaphane would help with, like you were saying, those guys that are over exercising and have oxidative stress, simply because what we talked about with the antioxidant response system and just all the benefits we've talked about so far.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that turns out.
That's an interesting framing if you think about it, because there's a lot of pieces in the literature saying that if you block with antioxidants, you blunt the exercise response. But that's for training. If you took a whole bunch of sulforaphane and you didn't get that damage, it probably would let you be able to exercise longer before you get the damage. So it's not necessarily bad that you would take it beforehand, but after you did the exercise and then afterwards, it would for sure benefit in the recovery phase. So there's still some questions out there, but I would think for performance, you don't really care whether you're going to increase your exercise tolerance when you're trying to get the fastest time. Blocking all those 5, 6, 7 different kinds of reactive oxygen species and reactive nitrogen species probably can let you exercise for longer before failure. So it's not necessarily as damaging as people are saying. So all the ones that have been shown to block exercise, the stimulus that makes you get stronger are like vitamin E, vitamin A, vitamin C, the direct antioxidants.
Well, I also, you hit it on the head. My audience is often middle-aged folks who are just trying to maintain mobility. They're trying to live their best lives. They are trying to keep up with, we're all looking forward to playing with our grandkids as they come along. We're all Gen Xers. We got hit with that low-fat, smoke cigarettes. We were the first generation to get hit with the really adulterated food supply and the massive amount of vaccines as children. And I just think that we're all just trying the best we can. Performance is great, but body composition is a little bit, obviously on the radar for a lot of women. We just want to maintain a nice figure. We're not trying to go for any kind of, Mr. Olympia or Mrs. Olympia competitions for the most part. And folks are not, we want to keep up with our husbands. We want to keep up with our kids and our grandkids. And so I know for myself, the older I get, not just the word recovery, like I hurt after I
Sure.
exercise. And I hear that from so many of my followers, and I have seen that with so many of my patients. There's just this post-inflammatory response that happens for about 2 days after. And it is crippling sometimes for some of us with chronic pain. So to have a tool that can help mitigate that, I think is a win.
Yeah, I mean, when we first created the powder and the supplement, basically we were taking it and we were like at the office and we're like, do your joints hurt anymore? No. Do your joints hurt anymore? No. And so, but it was like really quick, and we're like, so our very first internal study, it's kind of like a preclinical study. We looked at how quickly does it work, and so we showed that 2 capsules, so 10 milligrams of sulforaphane, um, decreases IL-6, so an inflammatory marker, 30% in 24 hours. And
Wow.
yeah, so that's enough so you can feel the difference from just 2 capsules.
That's huge. IL-6 is, for those listening, that's the on-ramp for autoimmune disease. I mean, if you can decrease IL-6, that's huge.
IL-6 is also what's driving osteoporosis.
Yes.
Loss of estrogen makes you induce IL-6.
IL-6 is a nasty. And I mean, we need it, obviously, it wouldn't be there if we didn't need it, but it goes, I don't know, I'll be totally honest. I took care of a lot of middle-aged women in my practice for a lot of years, and I did not get it until I was in it. I just did not get it. I really thought I did. I was very empathic, but in the back of my mind, they'd tell me like, I can't drink red wine anymore. It just wrecks me. It gives me hot flashes. I'm up all night. And I was like, oh, that sucks for you. And they would tell me, I can't have my estrogen prescription run out. Patients inevitably make their lack of planning your emergency as a physician, and they will bombard you with prescription requests because they're not organized and they don't have their labs done. And I can't legally keep writing scripts if I don't have lab work, right? Like it's a conundrum. And
Sure.
I would have women call me crying saying, can you just give me a week's worth? Because my pain is so crippling when my estrogen is gone. And so like all of these things, I empathized, and I always worked with them, of course, for their best outcomes, but I didn't get it until I was in it. And when I hear 25-year-old, 35-year-old, women especially, but men, chiropractors saying, oh, and I'm a chiropractor too, so no shade, but there's a lot of online chiropractors who love to go on and on about how you don't need hormone replacement therapy and you can just do it with supplements they sell conveniently with their name on them. And it just kills me because I'm like, no, until you're in it, living it, it's wicked and it changes everything. And there's an elegant way to go through menopause, and I'm trying my best to do it, but it's a rough go. It happens very abruptly. It's not something that happens to men. You guys get like a little bit of a different down ramp, whereas ours is just like falling off a cliff. And I would say the most notable sign for me, which brings me back to this, is how I realized I was heading into menopause was severe dark mood, severe depression, it was really apathy. It wasn't depression. It was a flatness that I cannot explain, but I could not find joy. No matter how hard I searched for it, no matter how many vacations I took, I was so flat. And the whole like, it's so fun as a middle-aged woman because you kind of stop giving a shit about what other people think about you. And then you really stop giving a shit. And I thought that part was so great. And then all of a sudden I hit this wall of apathy of like, I don't care about anything, to the point of like just absolute flatness leading into depression. And then you read the studies, and our age cohort is women in middle age has the highest suicide rate of women of any other age group. And I get it now. And then you exercise yourself into oblivion trying to chase that BDNF, trying to chase anything. And then I was in the research I was doing, I realized that sulforaphane upregulates BDNF too, which is awesome. I was like, okay, so we got anti-inflammatory, we've got it helping with our estrogen pathways, we got BDNF, we got the heat shock protein. So it's like checking the boxes for me.
Yeah. The BDNF, I mean, that's at the center of brain health, right? And so, and, besides the joint pain, most people can't tell like, okay, I feel most people, some people do, but I feel really toxic today and I took 2 capsules of broccoli and now I feel less toxic. That doesn't typically happen. But joint pain decreasing does. And then the BDNF actually can lead to vivid dreaming. And so basically, early on, I was doing customer service as well as everything. And there we have a 100-day unconditional money back guarantee. This guy was like, "This doesn't work for me." I was like, "Sure, I'll give you your money back. Let me ask you a question first. Like, have you had vivid dreams recently?" And he pauses. He's like, "No way. That's this." And it's like, "Yeah, that's it upregulates BDNF." And so yeah, not everybody. It doesn't happen to everybody, but yeah, it happens to quite a few people, and that's a sign that it's working.
Wow. I don't dream, and I have actually been dreaming lately. So, and I have been taking it religiously, but I've only been taking 1 capsule a day. So I'm going to double my dose now.
Yeah, I mean, 1 capsule works.
I might triple it.
Well, I won't tell you how many I take, but I have an unlimited supply. So
Okay. You're the dealer now. Sulforaphane dealer.
yeah, that's right. The first bottle's free. First bottle for you is free.
I can tell you a funny anecdote is that when I wanted to know, whether there was any toxicity. And
Oh, yeah.
so, I had famously grow proximal tubule cells from the kidney and, primary cells. And that's one of the most sensitive cells in the body for toxins because it does macropinocytosis, so those toxins accumulate in those cells. And so there's some papers out there showing sulforaphane has some apoptosis induction, at like 10 micromole, and ours, we're measuring it in blood. At least the physiological response to it is, close to 5 micromole. So we're worried, like, oh, we're getting close to, toxic levels. So we did that titration on cells in culture, and we couldn't find a high end. And I thought something was wrong, with my cells or something, because I'm not matching what's already published. And it turns out if you order sulforaphane from Sigma, where it's 100% sulforaphane, it does start showing cell death at 10 micromole. But ours, we went way past 100, 200 micromole, 300 micromole, still no cell death. So we think it's the entire matrix of the all the isocyanates that are part of, it's a whole food basically. And there are things that are buffering that toxicity. So it
And
was,
not only that, but John left that culture over the weekend. He came back, and not only were the cells not dead, they had grown more. And so
Wow.
it's protective on the kidneys. It actually helps grow kidney cells. And so, yeah, it's that. So that and a lot of this is also the difference between a glucoraphanin product. All of the literature, pretty much all the literature. I mean, Johns Hopkins actually, they discovered sulforaphane in 1992, but they created the Chemoprotective Center, which up until 5-6 years ago was the broccoli sprout growing operation for the research. And so that they would make broccoli sprout beverages to give to the participants in the studies, and that's the whole plant. And so it has not just sulforaphane, it has the other 7 isothiocyanates that do work together. And so yeah, so our sulforaphane supplement has those other products, and so it's much more like it's analogous to the research. Whereas if you're taking just a glucoraphanin supplement, it's not.
That's really important.
you're just making one, and you're making it in your colon.
Why is that bad, John?
Yeah, sulforaphane is pretty strongly antimicrobial. So if you take the precursor, the majority of the conversion happens by bacteria in your colon, and you're getting a high dose right exactly where that antimicrobial activity could be detrimental. We haven't proven that yet. We're a little bit scared to do the experiment, because they have already come after us before, and so we think that having the actual sulforaphane and it being disseminated right as soon as it gets to your stomach, small intestine, it's absorbed very quickly. It's actually protective for bacteria in your stomach, like H. pylori. It's protective of SIBO, if you get high doses released right into your small intestines, it would be protective. And it also induces bile salts. That's the master controller of biosynthesis, which is another way you protect against SIBO is
Yeah.
bile salt production.
That's awesome. Women of my age often have a lot of bile issues, and it gets all sluggish, and especially the ladies on the GLP-1. So that's really cool. That's a really important part. So let me rephrase what you said so that the audience understands. If it is working as an antimicrobial and it gets to the large intestine, we need the microbes to convert it. Because not your form, but the form that's out there otherwise is a precursor that needs to be converted by the microbiome of our gut to turn into the active form. But in cases of other products and competitors, it is potentially acting as an antimicrobial on the very organisms they need to convert it. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so that's not good. So yours is the active form and it's stabilized, and so then it absorbs quickly up closer in the chain. Yep.
Yeah, and not everybody has the gut bacteria to convert it. In fact, probably most people don't, right? And so there's a guessing game there that that we wanted to take away the guessing, and you just get what you get. You get 5 milligrams at least per capsule.
Yes. That's a good point. I was going to actually add that in. I'm like, most people's gut microbiome is a disaster, so mine included. So
Yeah.
no judging. I got a messed up one too. I was one of those kids. I came out the chute and I was immediately put on antibiotics, and I spent my whole young life on antibiotics, and so I have no microbiome. And now I'm that girl that inevitably ends up with some kind of gnarly pneumonia or something, like, knock on wood, I hate to say once a year, but I seem to find myself on, and I'm a naturopath. I'm going to go to naturopathic hell for taking antibiotics. So I'm not keen on them, but when you need them, and thank God for them. But it really, years of that really messes up your gut, which I was just telling my husband, I'm like, my hormones are so messed up because my gut's so messed up. And that's what's driving that stupid estrogen pathway going down the wrong way, because my gut health, I'm certain of it. So
microplastics can also wrongly modulate hormones. And so that's another thing.
Well, first, before we get to that, I want to ask you quickly, because this whole podcast and my whole platform is all about metabolic health. That's at the end of the day what I really preach. How can sulforaphane help with insulin sensitivity?
Yeah, so I would say that because of the pathways it's known to affect, maybe this is a pretty unknown thing, and it'd be a good place to talk about it, is that sulforaphane activates NRF2, but it also inactivates NF-kappa B.
Oh.
And so because NF-kappa B and AMP kinase are working off each other, when you block NF-kappa B, SIRT1 and AMP kinase work better. And then, like most people know, SIRT1 is part of making mitochondria work better. So it kind of unsticks this whole set of hubs that are part of longevity, and because of that, you see things moving in the metabolic space where they don't normally. Like curcumin is obviously a good anti-inflammatory, but sulforaphane has no problem with bioavailability. It goes everywhere in your whole body. So if part of your problem is you have some inflammation in your hypothalamus, and that's part of your mood and things that are going on there, sulforaphane can go there and unstick that spot there. That starts working better. And then curcumin following up can fill in some of those gaps. So curcumin with sulforaphane together as a metabolic stimulant is even better. And so our company is basically built on the fact that we were looking at these hubs that are really important things that you can push on that help metabolic health. So NRF2, NF-kappa B, AMP kinase. And so We talk about berberine for AMP kinase. That's the best inducer of AMP kinase. Curcumin is the best inhibitor of NF-kappa B inhibitor. Sulforaphane's the best NRF2 inducer. But when you get all three of those things humming, your metabolism just starts working better. You're not working against yourself. Pain levels go down. Your tissue starts repairing, and it sort of raises your metabolic health slowly all at one time, so that you don't have this problem making another problem worse before that's going on. And so our whole supplement line, you could easily just put up a map of longevity hubs and then look at the best compounds that affect those hubs. And sulforaphane hits the most, and that's why it was our first product. And I don't think a lot of people realize that the way it affects NF-kappa B is the same way it activates NRF2. It's through a reactive cysteine modification. It's a covalent change that happens. So when something happens covalently, it's not usually reversible. So you've completely changed that pathway with a small amount of sulforaphane, as opposed to 20, 30 micromoles of curcumin. In order to get the equivalent, you're getting it at 200 nanomoles of sulforaphane. And so I just think of all of the metabolic pathways as you want to stimulate in a way that it's not a hammer, not one
Yep.
hammer. I talk about that all the time. Is that metabolism has a lot of endocrine components to it, and those are like an orchestra. You have to have many small things. You pluck one, and you get resonance through the others, and it just seems like whatever sulforaphane is, it's like a really beautiful chord in that it pushes on a bunch of strings at the same time. And I think it unsticks a lot of people. So if you're one of those people that sitting at home, you can't get outside to exercise, your mood's off a little too much, you're grouchy with all your people that you're interacting with at work, it'd be a really great thing to just unstick a little bit some of this metabolic pathways, so you can kind of dig out. We talk about metabolic sinks all the time, and you have to push hard enough, and you have to push on enough nodes to get a person out of a metabolic sink. So sulforaphane is a great one, and we do have to be careful about saying it does too much, because like I was going to start talking about STAT3. That's a new thing that I found out. It directly conjugates and inhibits STAT3, which is in the center of inflammation in tons of ways. And I was looking for a supplement to try and work on the dimerization of STAT3, and it turns out sulforaphane is the best at that. So
Wow.
no need to make a new supplement now.
Yeah. Well, it's herbal medicine, at the end of the day, like nature delivers. And you're so right. Hammering, it's my issue with all these influencers online pushing peptides with absolutely it's crazy. Have you guys seen what's happening? Like it's crazy. And they don't understand what they're doing. They're just slamming pathways without the cofactors, without the gentle nudge that, like you said, sometimes you got to dig yourself out, and it's a process and it takes time. I have yet to meet a client or patient who everybody comes in thinking everything's going to happen so fast. Even just to get GLP-1s to work, sometimes we have to do 6 to 9 months of work just to get the GLP-1 to take, to actually activate and start helping them release weight, because I keep dosing really low. And it's just crazy. Like, people have no idea. And then they take all these peptides and start slamming different pathways, having absolutely no clue what they're doing. And it's a debacle.
Yeah. And I will say, John mentioned curcumin and berberine, and those are both lipid soluble. So like less than 1% of what you take gets through the gut barrier. It's like oil and vinegar, basically. And so what we try to do and what we do is make it possible so that enough gets through the gut barrier to move the needle on the biology. And so if you take not regular berberine, it less than 1% gets through. Like I think it's 0.6, 0.7%, but basically it's not going to impact your the AMP kinase, AMPK pathway. It's not going to impact your blood sugar. So one of my favorite studies John did. So basically he's very so he loves to he did an N-O-1 study looking at basically get how fast you can get into ketosis. So basically, in the literature, regular berberine, it's around 3 to 4 weeks of taking berberine daily, and with our berberine product, he basically didn't eat at night, got up in the morning, didn't eat, and took 2 of our berberines, and he was measuring his ketones and blood glucose, and he was in the light ketosis 4 hours later.
Wow.
So that's really good.
Yeah. No, you're right. Curcumin, berberine, those notoriously do not absorb well. So to have a highly bioavailable form is an advantage. And that matters a lot. You're so right. I used to hammer people with curcumin. We didn't have great forms back then, though.
Yeah.
You just had to take copious amounts of it. And now we've got these really elegant ways to get it in them. So that's awesome. So last but not least, we have to talk about microplastics. And I will preface this. I was on a text thread with some friends the other day, and I was on my high horse saying, you cannot mobilize plastics out of people. Microplastics are embedded, and they are in the cells, and they are in the tissues, and you cannot mobilize them. So then I read about how sulforaphane is mobilizing plastics potentially. So I want you guys to talk about that, because now I have to eat crow.
Yeah, well, I think it's good to just talk about what microplastics are really quickly, and I mean they're basically micron, so microscopic sized, so or even nano sized particles that you can either ingest, you can breathe in, or you can absorb through the skin. And so a lot of people look at ingestion, so it's what you swallow, what you eat, and so a first step is really thinking about where do they come from. And so like things like if you have frozen dinners that you microwave, those can leach, the plastic containers in that can leach millions of microplastics. I I was at I've been to numerous fancy hotels, and they love to have those pyramids shaped shiny tea
Yep.
bags. But it's nylon.
The
And so
worst. It's the worst.
yeah, and I didn't do the study, but it showed up to 2 billion microplastics just from one tea.
Yep.
Just like, yeah, and so things like and also in these hotels, you have a water bottle next to a coffee maker that has the plastic pod. So the water bottle's plastic, it has some microplastics. But when you heat that coffee pod, who knows how many? I mean, lots of microplastics get released. And then you have the disposable paper cup, right? So it's paper, so it's good. Well, those paper cups are lined with plastic,
Yep.
and so it gets heated up. And so, yeah, it's just you're getting 3 different places where you're getting microplastics. And how many coffees do people drink a day and every day? And so it's just this constant, but I mean, you actually get more microplastics from breathing than you do ingestion. And so, really depends on where you live, and if you live in a new house or old house, if you have a carpet or floors, or wooden floors. But basically, getting things like an air filter, like a HEPA filter that can really move the air and filter out these plastics is a huge. And if you have a lot of clothing that are plastic and you wash them and dry them, pull the lint trap out, everybody's seen the poof of dust, right? Of lint. And if most of your clothes are synthetics, like nylon, then that poof it's mostly microplastics. And so you don't want to breathe that in. But yeah, getting a water filter on your the drinking water you have, that's huge, not just for plastics, but for everything. And then, if you live in the country and you have on a well, you're golden. But then getting an air filter is super important.
I agree.
And so once you ingest them, though, they basically, they get engulfed in these things called lysosomes, which are the garbage disposals of the cell. And so and the thing with microplastics, though, is they're not neutral, right? We've just been alluding to this, but they're porous. And so they can basically have these plasticizers like BPA, which is an estrogen mimic. And you get if you can't mobilize them, they get built up. They stop up the sink, like you were talking about. And so, and then you have all these microplastics in these lysosomes that are just stuck there. And then those BPAs, those estrogen mimics, start getting released. And so it can be responsible for things like girls going into puberty earlier. It can be responsible for women having irregular menstrual cycles. And just it just messes up the signaling of the hormones. And I talk about it as like, you're watching TV, but on the TV, there are two television shows being played at the same time. You may be able to see a character that you recognize, and tell what shows are are on top of each other, but you're not going to know the plot. And so basically, it's like these signals are competing and can just get things confused. And so that's where, the last summer we were actually, because the sulforaphane is such good detox, we're thinking maybe we should do a microplastics study to see if it works in detox. But in August, we had read that this researcher had done that study in June, and he was a lysosome expert, and he was like, he took some of our product unbeknownst to us, and then wrote that Substack that you read, and showed that basically the day two after taking a rather large dose of sulforaphane, he had a huge release of microplastics. The lab that tested his blood said it was the largest microplastics in blood that they had measured to that date. And then the next day, he measured the blood again, and it had gone down to below baseline. And so, what we're doing is we're trying to figure out, okay, what's that next step? Where is it going? If it is getting excreted, which we think it is, how is it getting excreted? And so we're like actively. We should know in about 4 weeks. We're working with him to do that study of excretion.
So to summarize what you said, these lysosomes gobble up the garbage throughout the body, and there the plastic stays trapped. But the sulforaphane allows that to be released, which is awesome. But the problem is, where does it go from there, right? When we start mobilizing, meaning like I'll use the analogy of heavy metals, we have to give a chelating agent to get the metals to stir up out of the fat so that we can start to pull them out with whatever we choose to use. And so in this case, in the blog post, I'll link that through so people can read it. But the scientist you were talking about, that Substack, he mobilized them. He tested it in blood to prove it, but then like, where does it go? And then you and I were talking off air that in 4 weeks when the study comes out, it might show that the body's actually excreting it, because we want it out. We don't want to just mobilize it, right? We got to get it.
Correct. Yeah.
And sulforaphane may do both.
That's correct. And the pathway that he talks about in that paper, the resveratrol actually, John, why don't you jump in, because you have a pretty lovely analogy.
Yeah. Yeah. So the lysosome is made to digest, parts of cells as part of, the terminal, like it's the toilet part of the cell, right? And so sulforaphane can be thought of as the flush. So there's a pathway for doing that, and it's through a receptor called mucolipin-1. And so it has a redox sensitive cysteine that's just the same as what I was talking about earlier about on KEAP1 and on I-kappa, kappa beta for NF-kappa B pathway. So this is actually in the lysosome membrane. And when you activate that, you release calcium from the lysosome, and it initiates a signaling cascade where the same pathway where you get neurotransmitters dumped into the synaptic cleft in your brain. It's for neurotransmission. It's a synaptotagmin complex and LAMP2. It fuses with the cell surface and actually releases the lysosome right into the extracellular space. So I'm sure people don't think too much about, what is that space? Where does it go? But that feeds right into the lymphatics. So what we have been saying is that you want to move your lymphatics so you can release it, and then we're pretty sure that the way it gets back into your blood is through lymphatics. So it is capable of traveling through lymphatics and back, and gets dumped back into your heart and goes out through your circulatory system again. And from there, it's kind of a mystery, but they are able to be mobilized, so that's a good thing. And then the other part of the lysosome system is there's a master transcription factor that regulates lysosome production. It's called TFEB1. And resveratrol is very good at inducing this whole set of genes that are made to make your lysosomal system a better conveyor belt. So it's like improving the plumbing on your house, getting a bigger toilet or an industrial toilet or bigger pipes. And then so you can flush it and tolerate more garbage as well. So I think that combination of sulforaphane and resveratrol is a phenomenal one for microplastics. And we're hoping that we're going to see a big increase in microplastics coming out in skin and feces or urine. So that's where we're looking.
That's awesome, because there's really, to what I was barking about the other day to my friends was there's just no good way to do this. We have plasmapheresis and we have some other really expensive and I would say dangerous treatments. I'm not a huge fan of the casuality with which so many clinics are employing plasmapheresis. I feel like it's not, I get the emails as a physician, I get the emails from the companies that produce these machines and they're just like, oh, bring it in office. It's a great in-office procedure. And I'm like, with a lot of potential risks. So this is really incredible. And I eat crow. And I was preaching about this on my Instagram. You can't get microplastics out. And here I am. I'm eating cold crow, everybody. So we'll see. I'm really excited. You guys will have to let me know how that study turns out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I want to hit on what you said. Herbs synergize, and the active molecules and constituents of herbs synergize. And so the resveratrol with the sulforaphane, with the curcumin, those are beautiful harmonies. And I think that, like you were saying with the orchestra, right? Like it's very similar with basically in my head, herbal medicine. Like these things stack and synergize with each other. And you can get, like resveratrol has really cool impacts on those estrogen pathways too, and so you can kind of amplify, if you will, the impact you're having by adding in some of these different substances. And you guys produce really wonderful quality versions of all of those. So, and a lot of other really cool products in your line. So people should check that out too. And like you said, they're highly bioavailable, which is not always easy to do. Was there anything else that I didn't touch on that you want to share with the audience?
Good question.
About sulforaphane?
It's great for your skin.
Yeah, tell me more.
So, if you have people with acne, it can be hard to get rid of that. And so we have, testimonials of people, within several weeks, seeing a noticeable difference, if not a complete, reversal. And that's because of the NRF2 pathway. And
wow.
It gets to each skin cell.
My daughter has struggled with cystic acne her whole life, and it's finally under control at 26. But man, that was a rough ride. It was a really terrible thing to see in a young person. It ruined a lot of fun in her life because she would hide because her skin was, not behaving very well. That's amazing. What about wrinkles and sagging?
Just taking it, we talk about anti-aging. And so just taking it, your skin does look more youthful. I don't know about wrinkles or sagging, but
at least one of the pathways that it works well for is enos. So does resveratrol. So you get nitric oxide, so you get better circulation. So that's a big component of it. I was just say if there was one thing I'd like to convey to people about our supplements is we're trying to push this idea that we want to make we want to call a generation 4 bioavailable uh, carrier. So we're in the process of getting it patented, but our criteria was to get the active molecule into the bloodstream. And so that was how we developed that technology. And so if you're talking about curcumin, it doesn't really matter that, everybody's competing for the amount of glucuronidated curcumin because it's completely inactive. And so every paper that you've ever read about bioavailability, they take a blood sample and then they take two enzymes, sulfatase and a glucuronidase, and strip off those modifications on the curcumin and then measure curcumin. And really that has nothing to do with anything because those are completely inactive. So measuring the actual functional molecule in the bloodstream is what we want to do. And then what we found when we were gathering the data to submit the patent was that some of the highest bioavailable compounds out there actually make inflammation go up. So if you're messing up the enterocytes in order to get more curcumin in, it's actually defeating the purpose. So just for people out there that have tried, some of the products that are higher bioavailable versions of berberine or curcumin or silymarin or any of these other things, if you take the one that we had developed, you don't have the enterocyte disruption problem associated with that. So that's one of those things that I'm on my little stool now preaching.
Soapbox.
No, that's awesome. You're right. They use black pepper and other things and they say, oh, we put black pepper in it so it'll absorb. That's just causing leaky gut. The black pepper is just aggravating the enterocytes, like you said.
Yeah, and instead of decreasing your inflammation, it's increasing your inflammation.
Yes, because I think we've established that leaky gut is probably the driver of a lot of these issues. So yeah, putting you're throwing curcumin in to heal it all up and decrease inflammation, and then it's got black pepper to deliver it. And I'm with you. That's not a great strategy.
And the one a lot of doctors say is the most bioavailable actually is 97% detergent and 3% curcumin. And so that really, really, that can, if you take enough of it, that can throw you into a storm of it can make you really sick, basically. But
I use that compound in the lab to strip LPS off the outside of bacteria.
Oh no. What form is that? Can you say?
Yeah, the detergent is polysorbate 80.
That's probably enough.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so bad. Explain why that's so bad, because the LPS is like the harbinger of doom.
Yeah, so gram-negative bacteria have on the outside something called endotoxin or lipopolysaccharide. And I think one of the missing pieces that people don't know is they're all different degrees of inflammation stimulation. So if you take one like salmonella and you want to get a really potent immune reaction, you mix that with polysorbate 80 and it strips the LPS off the surface, and then you can use that as a stimulant. And then we do that to stimulate macrophage and then see what blocks it. And so just as a heads up, if people are interested in blocking some of that, is EGCG is one of the best inhibitors of that. But almost all of the products that we make will block TLR4.
The LPS is, I remember listening to my friend Karan Krishnan give a lecture years ago, and he was explaining the LPS diabetes link and the LPS obesity, and I was like, oh, everything that's wrong with modern Americans is being driven by, which brings us back to gut health again. That's wild. Yeah, we don't want to free the LPS from this bacterium if we can help it. That's not a great strategy.
Yeah. And Dr. Shania, I mean, I'd say one other thing, since you asked.
Yeah.
I mean, we would be remiss not to say that we came out with a actual menopause product, since we've been talking about menopause. So sulforaphane does a lot, like, right? And so what we wanted is to, like, what doesn't it do? And so we wanted to basically come out with a menopause product that would supplement, fill the holes, and it's good on its own, but it works in all the three different stages of menopause. And we're very, very excited. We just launched it a few weeks ago.
Well, you'll have to send me some. I'll try it and I'll let you know how it goes. What ell's in it besides the sulforaphane, or is there sulforaphane in it?
There's no sulforaphane in it. There's cursonic acid, black cohosh, and actually our bioavailable resveratrol. We call it resveratrol.
And how are those beneficial to menopause for the women listening?
Yes, the black cohosh is clinical studies showing that it works on serotonin, dopamine, and the hypothalamus, and so those are sort of the temperature regulation and mood centers. So it helped with that. And then carnosic acid is one of these molecules that I've been looking at for a long time because it can work synergistically with a lot of the ones that we already have now. So it has very broad activity. It's a mild NRF2 inducer, mild NF-kappa B inhibitor, and mild AMP kinase activator. And so this sort of slow bleed out of menopause. That was a terrible analogy.
It is. That's what it feels like.
And then resveratrol is an estrogen receptor beta agonist, selective agonist. So, for the people that are worried about the ER alpha issue, a large number of the side effects from menopause are because of the loss of estrogen receptor beta activation. So you can recover some of the ER beta.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know that. That's great. Okay. So many benefits. Okay, I'm going to have to try it, and I will let you guys know because I'm going to take it with my Broc Elite. So the Broc Elite is the sulforaphane supplement I've been taking. I've been taking it for months now. I like it. I really do. I like it. I have not retested my Dutch test, but I can say that I am definitely less symptomatic. So it's doing something. And also moving to Arizona and getting enough sun has helped too. I would be remiss not to at least give the credit to some of that.
And you're dreaming.
Yes, I'm dreaming. That's crazy. I am dreaming. I just notoriously didn't dream for decades, and I have been dreaming a ton, and I didn't know what it was from. That's wild. Interesting. I'll have to pay more attention to that. I don't always remember them, but I'll wake up and start telling my husband something about a dream, and then I realize, wait a minute, I'm talking decades, you guys. I haven't dreamed since I was in medical school. The stress of it, and it never let up. The stress just kept going because once you graduate, you start your practice and on
Sure.
it goes. So anyway, well, you guys were generous enough to offer a really sizable discount to my listeners. And it is through May 7th, and they can go to, I'm going to make sure I don't mess this up because there's a hyphen in there, isn't there? Mara Labs with a hyphen. So MARA-labs.com and /drtyna. Use code drtyna at checkout to get 25% off. And after that, the discount will go down to 15%, which is still really generous. And it's on all of your products. So I hope people will head over there and check it out.
Yes, please do. We offer a 100-day unconditional money-back guarantee. So feel free to try the products. And if you're like, okay, I gave it a try, it doesn't work, we'll refund you.
Good policy. Well, this has been so fun, you guys. I kind of want to sit down and drink wine with you and pick your brain, Dr. John, and let you just unleash the biochem upon us. So we'll have to have you back on the show, and we can dive into some other subjects. But thank you so much for coming on, guys. This was really fun.
Thank you so much for having us. It has been fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So everyone go to Mara Labs, mara-labs.com /drtyna. I'll put it in the show notes as well. And check out the Broc Elite and their other products there. They've got the resveratrol product and the curcumin and the new menopause products. So we will see you guys next time. Thank you so much for everyone who's listening, and we will see you next week. Thanks for listening to the Dr. Tina Show. This is a Wellness Loud production produced by Drake Peterson. Theme song is by John the Guilt. You can watch the full video version of this podcast inside the Spotify app or on YouTube. As always, you can email the podcast at podcast@drtyna.com. That's DRTYNA. And if you like this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can also find all of my offerings on my website at drtyna.com. For more shows by my team, go to wellnessloud.com. See you next time, and thanks for listening. This podcast is for general informational purposes only. It does not constitute the practices of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. I am a doctor, but I am not your doctor. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content on this podcast is intended not to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions.